For me, I think that just like in public health, like I stumbled on writing when I decided to help people edit their work. When I started like giving them content feedback, I realized that I had a passion for it and then that I had a talent for it. And this is coming from a place where, I speak different languages. And so, again, just the art of expression in a different cultures differ. I had to take that into account as well. And that led me to creating a business.
You are now listening to the podcast where authors inspire listeners to become authors, the Going North Podcast. I'm your host, certified self-leadership trainer, best-selling author, and book enthusiast, DomBrightmon. And you're going to be listening to a different author that will inspire you to join the business of immortality, known as authorship. Now let the fun begin. Today's episode is sponsored by both books, Going North, Tips and Techniques to Advance Yourself, and the follow-up bestseller, Stay the Course, The Elite Performer's 7 Secret Keys to Sustainable Success. Head over to Amazon.com, pick up both books. They are available in a trifecta of paperback, audio, and ebook. Cop all three of both and be on the lookout for another book from yours truly to help podcasters succeed. Now let's get on with today's episode. And today on the highlight reel builder for authors known as the Going North Podcast, we got another super special awesome human for you today, courtesy of podmatch.com, the wonderful site where podcast guests get to connect with podcast hosts. And if they're cool, they're freaking in. And today's guest is cooler than two cucumbers indeed. That's right, indeed, because she's a fellow Marylander, y'all. That's right, indeed. She's one of my favorite kind of people, one of the folks who's in the same magical state of the magical Queen Anne state of Maryland, baby. That's right, indeed. And not only is she a wonderful fellow Marylander, she's also a wonderful best-selling author, as well as a speaker, entrepreneur, freelance writer, and future doctor. And not only that, she's also the founder of her own organization, the MESFAMI Care Incorporated. So let's give it up for the victorious, the fabulous, the one and only Venchele Saint Dic. How you doing today, Venchele?
I'm doing good, Dom. How are you doing? And thank you. This was like a great introduction. I appreciate you. Yeah, that was a great introduction.
Wait, one of the better parts of the show is before the rabbit holes appear. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. So, my goodness, no matter how good introductions are, they're not allowed to be, I don't know, 55 years long. They're probably only covered maybe 5 minutes. So, my filling in any cavities on how you became the Venchele that you are today?
Well, what specifically would you like me to cover? Because there are a host of events and I guess lived experiences that make up who I am.
I mean, for the start from the womb when you were swimming around, that's cool too. I mean,
Yes. So a little bit about me is that I was born in the States, but I grew up in another country. And so by living in a country and, being surrounded by abject poverty sort of steered me into, when I came to the US to focus on a field, public health, to help people sort of transcend these situations. I mean, again, there's no clear cut solutions to any of the issues that we're dealing with in terms of homelessness. I mean, we're able to tackle it, we're able to remove it. But again, like there's so many external forces at play that it makes it nearly impossible to like poke the holes in this like complex system, if that makes sense. But that's a little bit about me. I know that you talked about like, being an entrepreneur. So I'm like the third generation entrepreneur in my family where I, help people write and co-author their stories with them and provide editing services through my side business Pathway Coach Writing. And again, I use podcasting, but also other various ways through blogs and through like my written work, to really share my expertise like with a broader audience.
Nah, that's what I'm talking about, indeed. If I'm not mistaken, you basically grew up in Haiti, if I'm not mistaken, right?
I grew up in Haiti. I was born in the States, but the cradle of my family is in Haiti, Martinique, and France.
Oh wow. Okay. There you go. There you go. Indeed. And did you have to go through that horrible, I think it was the horrible storm of 2008 or 2009, if I'm not mistaken?
That's like you talking about the earthquake. So that was back in 2010. When it happened a month before, I was in Haiti. And what pretty much saved me, I would say, was when I had to travel to Spain, to study abroad. And so I believe I left maybe a couple of days before the earthquake took place. I still have family there, my immediate family living there. And again, I know it just recently passed the anniversary, and it's always like just a sad reality, like a sober moment that we lost like one of our family members in the earthquake on my mother's side. And I'm still reminded that had I stayed, who knows what could have happened, because I know people who lost their entire family during that earthquake.
Yeah, definitely sorry to hear that because when I heard you grew up over there in Haiti, I'm like, oh man, she's a freaking survivor in and it sounds like you were able to get up before it really turned up over there, sadly. So would you consider that one of your catalysts for choosing public health as your realm of expertise?
I wouldn't say that the earthquake was a catalyst per se. I think it was just the living conditions that I was surrounded by when I was growing up in Haiti. And then also seeing, people not being able to access healthcare because Haiti, typically most people get their healthcare through their employer. And so you can only imagine when you're not working, and when you're unemployed, those benefits are sort of like stripped away from you. And so because the country is fraught with, violence and just being governed at this point, like, by gang leaders, it further reduces opportunities, for people to access, basic resources like food and clean water, or even go to the doctor.
Yeah, definitely rough indeed. Definitely can imagine that on that front with being a huge, I guess, in a way, part of your mission, really. So, my goodness, and you're working on your doctorates too. So, I guess we call you Dr. Van Schell in a matter of time, if I'm not mistaken, probably a year or two, maybe.
Well, not a year. I just started. So this is my first year, maybe in 4 years' time. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Actually, that was like one of the I was talking to someone about what 23, and I know your podcast is talking about in terms of going north, right? And I definitely feel like 2023 was quite a year on so many levels. And for me, on a personal level, making the decision to go back to school was not an easy one. And now that I am in it, I definitely think that it was just a good call, to go now, given the recent situation with for our like in our educational system. I think it's so critically important, to have people like us, continue to strive and to go for these terminal degrees for sure.
Ah, there you go. There you go. Indeed. So she's a woman on a mission indeed. So sounds like you're gonna be as busy as a one-legged person in a kicking contest. Oh
But
man,
what are
oh
your
man.
thoughts on that, in terms of people who look like us getting these terminal degrees and trying to ensure that we continue to have representation across different fields of discipline? What are your thoughts on that?
Hey, I say it's a good thing. More representation is always a good thing, especially across the board. So that way you can have more, I guess, more melanin in the space. Definitely more melanated people in the space is definitely a good thing indeed, especially for folks across the globe too, especially because hey, the diaspora's huge. There's different shades of us everywhere. And it's like, hey, more representation across the board is definitely a good thing. Like I got nothing against it. I'm all for it.
Wow. Yes.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So, future doctor, and she's also an entrepreneur. So, my goodness. So, did you always love writing? Was that something that you loved as a younger version of Miss V herself when she was in grade school?
Not necessarily. I was introduced to reading like around like 4 years old. And I think that maybe in retrospect, like this sort of was the catalyst, for me to become passionate about writing. And to be honest with you, like in grade school, I wasn't really thinking that far ahead. I mean, again, I was always and very ambitious, like I did well in school, but I never thought that I would be in a position to be in the driver's seat. Because like they have all these self-help books, they talk to you about the 10 steps to fulfilling your dreams. And for me, I think that just like in public health, like I stumbled on writing when I decided to help people, edit their work. Like, when I started like giving them content feedback, I realized that I had a passion for it, and then that I had a talent for it. And this is coming from a place where, I speak different languages. And so again, just the art of expression in a different, in different cultures differ. I had to take that into account as well. And that led me to creating a business and doing this like as a part-time gig for sure.
Ah, beautiful indeed, beautiful indeed. And you're even joined the business of immortality yourself with your wonderful book, if I'm not mistaken. What are those wonderful multi-author books? Passport to Self-Discovery, Volume 2.
Yes, I'm a co-author of that book. And I talk about like my Peace Corps service. I don't want to give it away because again, I would want people to check out the book because it's a wonderful book and it outlines people's different travel stories. I know for me, I mostly focused it on my Peace Corps service and talked about the woes and the challenges and also like the good times, the benefits of serving and doing community service, to redress public health challenges. And so and if nothing else, I think the Peace Corps was a springboard for me to understand which branch of public health that I wanted to focus in and where I could have the most impact. Because when we're talking about community service, we also need to talk about again, like, what can we do, to really help communities build themselves and empower them, to go from one state from an existing state to a future state, whatever that looks like for them. I know that for my community, when I first came in, they didn't have electricity. They didn't have, you know, a clinic that could serve like the growing population. It was that little clinic was that small clinic was appropriate, maybe a few years back. But by the time I came, the population had grown, you have an influx of children being born. And so, I did a project where I partnered with an organization for them to build like a bigger clinic. And that clinic now is a hospital or kind of an extension of a hospital for sure. And it's helping people get access to the needs, the basic healthcare needs, the healthcare services that they need.
There you go. Providing folks with those needs that they need. Indeed. So, my goodness, it sounds like you've done a lot of world travel, especially being a part of the Peace Corps. So, any three major lessons that stick out to you from all your world travels?
I would say the first lesson that I've learned through my Peace Corps service is that change cannot be managed without continuity. So, as I mentioned to you earlier, I came up with this community health project where I wanted my community to have access to healthcare services by building a community hospital. And as we're speaking, this hospital is continuing to be maintained and managed, by the community itself. And so that was like one of the major lessons I've learned in my Peace Corps service. And then also, again, quoting from The Alchemist, a book that's written by Paulo Coelho, never lose that sense of wonder, that sense of curiosity to understand the world around you, the environment, the context, so that you can truly understand like your part in the change process and where you can contribute to your community. And then also I would say the third lesson that I've learned is that, and I'm sort of reflecting on my time in the doctoral program, is that even when we're talking about leadership, whether it be in public health or different fields of study, I think that we need to try to move away like from an autocratic approach, the top down approach, and really starting to drive change from the lens of the people who are going to be impacted. I don't remember I don't remember offhand the term for it, but I think that when we're talking about, leading, we need to stop saying, well, we're managing people. I think we lead people, but we manage things. And so how can we continue to put in the hands of people who are actually going to be impacted by the change that we're making, like more power, more leverage? How can we empower these people to create and sustain change? And I think that I began to learn a little bit about that process, right, when I became a Peace Corps volunteer.
Ah, sweet. That's what I'm talking about. Days I'm talking about indeed. And that first point definitely was a powerful one because it's like, yeah, when it comes to change, you really gotta keep it going. To be honest, you gotta ask for continuity. You can't just like make a decision like, hey, let's start this wonderful initiative here, and then first sign of contact where it's like, oh, this plan failed. Like, let's instead of regrouping, it's like, oh, let's go back. Let's go back like instantly now, now. It
But
doesn't
why would we
always.
go back? When you say go back, what do you mean by that? Do you mind just providing more of an explanation about that?
Well, as an example, let's say in an organization, let's say if they're still keeping a lot of records through paper as opposed to switching over to actually making it digital, stuff like that, where it's like, oh yeah, we should real in case for some strange reason they chose the wrong software to actually store their files as opposed to scanning them appropriately and things like that. That's what I'm talking about from there. It doesn't have to be like on a major scale, just something from just one small change where it's like, oh God, let's change it to change it back when it's like, hey, let's actually give this thing a chance here. That's what I mean by that.
Right. And you would be surprised, like even when we have people use who understands the benefits or the utility of AI, they still want to do or perform basic tasks, the old way. And I'm not saying there's a right or wrong way of doing anything really. I think it's a question of context. It's a question of whether or not it works or doesn't work. So for example, for me, like why would I use pen and paper to take notes when there are apps where I can use on the computer where I can take notes, pretty quickly. And so I think it's a question of what do you value? Do you value time consuming, like, practices, or are you trying to be more efficient?
That's right, indeed. Gotta have that efficiency in mind. That's right, indeed. Don't have to chisel into a stone anymore.
That's true.
That's right, indeed. We would be carrying a lot of Dwayne Johnsons around if that was the case. That's right, indeed. With all the rocks you have to ride on. So my goodness, since you're an entrepreneur, there's always probably setbacks along the way in the journey. So has there been a major setback that you consider that actually sets you up for success?
I think entrepreneurship, again, depending on who you talk to, will tell you that it's the best thing since sliced bread. But you're right. There are some challenges. And I think for me, like when I think about my business, because right now I am in a phase where I am taking a step back, revisiting my business plan and seeing whether or not it makes sense. Because remember when I talked about moving from an existing state to a future state? Well, that's the same concept that I'm using for my business plan. And I would say that the challenge has always been, how do you continue to make your services relevant to your audience? And if you don't want to work with your current audience and you want to attract a new set of, new set of people, how do you cater your services to them without having to spend a whole lot of money on rebranding and what have you? And it's a tough call. It's a tough call, I think, because if you spent X amount of years, because I've been doing this, I've been in the game for like more than 8 years, in the writing editing industry. That's always a question I'm always asking myself, like what I'm currently providing or what I was providing pre-pandemic, is this still relevant to people post-pandemic? And then also in this AI centric culture that we find ourselves in, how can I make myself, and it's not even about focusing on the competitive advantage at this point. It's just trying to figure out, like, how am I creating value to my clients? And I think that's where what I mentioned earlier before is really moving away from a top-down approach to seeing the organization, or to seeing like my business from the viewpoint or from the lens of my clients. Like, what do they deem important? And how can I shift in a way that makes sense to me and that is healthy for me? Because no one is trying to make changes and pay a lot of money. That's a fact.
Yeah, true. It's true indeed. Because, yep, speed is important to a lot of people nowadays, and it has been cost effective too. They want it fast now, and, and they want it to be cost effective too. Especially with some folks may get burned by certain coaches out there, depending on what they're doing and depending on what their goals were, indeed.
Okay. Yeah, that's right. Like, so yeah, I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying, because before I started my businesses, I was looking at some of these packages and I'm thinking to myself, I'm paying for someone else's mortgage, which is great. And at the same time, I may not have enough money to pay for that mortgage. And so that's why, even when I was writing my business plan and I was doing my market research, that was a huge factor, like the price. And I decided that, hey, I don't want to just make this available to people like you and I, but I also want to make it available for students. How much, and how much discount can I give to a student so that they can afford, they're able to afford me? Because people will always tell you, you should just focus on your value, right? And base the price on your value. And there is truth to that. And at the same time, you don't want to alienate everyone either. And I think that's why when I think about my services, I always ask myself, who is being included and who's being excluded? And if there are people being excluded, why? And based on the answer that I get, like after some self-reflection, then I'm able to see, okay, what are some of the changes that I can make, if that makes sense.
All the nickels and pennies and quarters makes all the sense. That's right, indeed. So, my goodness, since you've been on a few interviews or recently promoting the work that you're doing, is there a question that you wish folks would ask you more often when you're doing interviews like this?
No, I don't have like any specific questions that I wish people would ask me more. I think that I believe in not being extremely formal. Like I have a type A personality, so naturally, like being formal is like my go-to. It's like my modus operandi. And at the same time, I've been on podcasts where people were very informal and I was perfectly fine. I was fine, just because I do believe that when you go onto podcasts, it's supposed to be a conversation. Just like with interviews, it's supposed to be a conversation where they're selectively choosing you and you're also selectively choosing them. So I don't think there's a right or wrong question that I've been asked or anything in particular I wanted people to talk to me more about. because I figured that the questions are coming from a genuine place, and it's again, it's based on the context we find ourselves in. Like there's some podcasts where we always talk about pathway coach writing, but again, someone could take something that I said from writing and try to relate it to my personal life, or to something that's outside of the, I don't know, that's outside of the set of questions that they may have. As long as it's organic, I think that's what matters.
There you go. That's right, indeed. Organic. That's right, indeed. Keep those pesticides away, y'all, metaphorically.
Okay. Just because it's organic doesn't mean that it's gonna get the pest away, by the way. Just letting you know.
There you go. So you're peeling away the terms, huh?
We have to, because you talk about organic. You and I both know just because it's organic doesn't mean, okay, that it's safe to eat. Anyway.
There you go. That's right, indeed. You think it's a normal mushroom? Let me stop.
Yeah, actually, yeah, exactly. You don't want to scare people away like, hey, y'all can still go to the grocery store.
There you go. That's right, indeed. Don't want to go to the grocery store and wake up as the store. Well, speaking of groceries, fun question for you. If your fabulous book, Passport to Self Discovery, a compilation of life changing travel stories from extraordinary authors, if that book were a food, what would it be and why?
That's a very good question. What would it be? It would have to be something sweet and tart. So I'm guessing maybe yogurt. I mean, because I thought about ice cream at first, and still, I don't think that this experience was completely sweet. If nothing else, there are certain parts like I needed to grow through and go through, and it didn't seem, it just didn't. Let's just say that the experience was not as smooth sailing as I would have wanted it to be. So it can't be ice cream. So it has to be something that's tart and that can be sweet. So yogurt it is.
There you go. There you go. Keep it folks healthy. You love to see it. Yes, indeed. Well, we're coming down to the magical question that every guest gets to receive, and that is if you don't wake up tomorrow and you were 25 again, but you're still in the current year, what advice would you give to yourself?
I would just say to my 25-year-old self, even though it doesn't feel too long ago when I was 25, to trust the process. I mean, even as I am reflecting on our conversation and I think about how I landed here, I think it was a combination of preparation for sure. And at the same time, taking a leap of faith. Actually, I was writing an essay 2 days ago where I had to reflect on that because even with my job, like the jobs that I've taken on over the years before I became an entrepreneur, these jobs chose me. And so I was definitely on the passenger seat. And then now I am in the driver's seat. And I'm looking at just my career trajectory from a different lens, right? And I'm not saying that when you're in the passenger seat, you're not participating, but maybe you're not participating in a way that's helpful to you, or participating in a way where you're going to get the most return on your investment. And so I would just say to my 25-year-old self just to trust the process, and then to do what I've done, continue to strive to be in the driver's seat when it comes to like molding your career.
So there you go, folks. Ride that bike with no handlebars. Trust the process, y'all. That's right, indeed. You're in the driver's seat, indeed. That's right, indeed. Pop all the wheelies for no reason. That's right, indeed. Let me stop.
I don't know about popping the wheels though. Like that's a safety hazard.
Who knows? It might be better than popping bottles. You never know.
Okay. Well, either way, if we had to choose between pop the wheels and pop the bottle, I'm going to pop the bottle because that's safer to me.
There you go. There you go. Or better yet, it's a bottle on wheels. It's a wheeling and dealing. Oh man, sorry, indeed. I could tell you pictured it.
I mean, that's what we pivoted very, very. It went from 0 to 100 real quick, like Drake would say.
Hey, as long as there's no bunny ears on the bottle, we're good.
Fact.
There you go. But I do, folks need to have their bunny ears on when it comes to hopping to your content. So for those need to do just that and keep it with you and your journey, what's the best way for folks to do so?
They can follow me on LinkedIn because that's where I live. Literally, that's my home base. And they can find me on all social media handles, Instagram, Facebook, by typing my name, as you will have in the description box, and then also Pathway Coach Writing. So this is how people can get a hold of me. And then also through my website at www.pathwaycoachwriting.com.
Woohoo! There you go. Pathway coach writing. It's right indeed. It's right indeed. It's a good pathway, y'all. It's right indeed. She'll get you ready to go with six-pack riding abs. And if you see a fork in the road, she's got you covered. That's right indeed. You'll think it's a fork, but it's really a spoon. It'll scoop you back into success mode, baby. That's right indeed. That's right indeed. It's a pathway coach. We're going to put a link to the wonderful Miss V's mighty website in the show notes that we can do just that. Head over to the wonderful website and you can shoot us some magical DMs on LinkedIn, some proper ones, not no random marketers. I don't claim marketers. I don't claim marketers. I don't claim them. If they send you something, they work for me. But anyways, keep
That's
on
true.
the show.
That's true. I mean, we get, and that's what people don't understand. There's spammers out there.
Yeah, one of the drawbacks about 2020 to 2022, especially 2021, folks found out LinkedIn was a nice place to post stuff. Then they went balls to the wall with it. It ruined it. Yeah, it's like, oh, if you didn't use LinkedIn before, oh, you're gonna hate it when you start using it now. Oh man. Well, before we dig deeper to that rabbit hole, any parting words before we close up shop?
To be honest with you, I don't have any parting words because I think that, our episode today was not just about, pathway coach writing, but also I think we shared some nuggets on how people can move forward in terms of, finding their North Star. And the last question that you asked about what I would say to myself if I was 25 is really, trusting the process and just being patient with oneself, like as you trying to figure out like what the next moves are, whatever that looks like in your world.
If you're hearing this part of the episode, that means you're one cool individual. Thanks a bunch for tuning in, and if you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to share it with at least one other person in your network. Bonus points for 3. And be sure to check out the backlog too while you're at it, because there are hundreds of wonderful episodes to choose from as well.